Welcome to the National Funeral Directors Association's 136th International Convention and Expo, held October 29th through November 1st, 2017 in Boston, Massachusetts. We now join this session, which was recorded live.
It's my pleasure to welcome you. We're going to be doing this kind of a shared presentation. I'm sharing the stage with Daniel and Jamie Wieting, and we're going to be talking about how we've used the Have the Talk conversation cards in our businesses and share some great ideas with you. First of all, just to kind of give you a little foundation, I want to get an idea how many people in the room are familiar with the Have the Talk of a Lifetime campaign. Okay, about half. Okay, and how many of you have heard the presentation that kind of gives you the background behind the program, how it evolved? Okay, just a few. So if you'll indulge me, I'll kind of give you a little bit of the Reader's Digest version of that, because I think it really lays a good foundation for how you use this in your business and in your community. My former position, I worked at the National Funeral Directors Association, and I ran their operations. And I was privileged to be involved in the development of this campaign. And it all started, if you've ever heard of the organization in funeral service called FAMIC, it's the Funeral and Memorial Information Council. And this is a group of associations on both the professional and supplier side that are interested in issues that relate to funeral service. And they were having a discussion about the troubling trend of people doing immediate disposition and not having any memorialization. And not only the impact that that has on our businesses, but that also that it has on people personally, because we all know the value of funeral ceremony and how it helps people begin their journey of their life without their loved one. And so we're like, how are we going to start, dealing with this and hopefully reversing this trend? And so the first thing they said is, we don't want to just be a bunch of funeral people sitting around a table and trying to figure out that we know what consumers are thinking. And they were like, we've got to base this campaign on sound research. And that's precisely what they did. They worked with a company called Olson Zaltman and Associates, which is a marketing firm. And they have a very unique patented process that they use to do the research. So the next time you're at a dinner party and you want to impress people, you can tell them that you know what ZMET is. Okay, it's the Zaltman Metaphor Elicitation Technique. So it sounds impressive anyway. But what it is instead of doing traditional research where people just fill out a survey on a computer or something like that, they do in-person interviews, and they do them using metaphors to describe whatever the subject matter is that's being discussed. So even if they're talking about, what are your feelings on frozen concentrated orange juice, you bring in pictures that represent your feelings on that subject matter. So they selected in two different markets people who have either arranged for someone else or maybe desire for themselves what we consider to be a non-traditional funeral. And they got them into a room and they said, we want to figure out what your feelings are on traditional funerals, and also what your feelings are on about how you would like to be remembered, or what would your life celebration look like. And so the people, basically the pictures that were brought in to describe the traditional funeral, as you can imagine, were black and white, dark, dreary, the picture of the old haunted house, people crying, very somber. And so the consensus among the people on the traditional funeral was that they felt it was very lonely and dark. I felt very controlled. I was just told to go through this ritual and then go. And I was not able to, begin to even, I'm kind of forced to accept the fact that this person's gone. And their consensus was, and I find this pretty depressing, but they felt that traditional funerals were a lonely, lifeless tomb. Wow, pretty bad. And so as you can imagine, the pictures that they brought in to represent what they wanted for their life celebration were colorful, happy, people tinking glasses, children running and laughing, balloons. It was joyous. And the consensus among the people that were involved in the survey was, my life mattered. And so it was, that began the basis of the Have the Talk of a Lifetime program, is that we want people to start having conversations about life. And what a wonderful thing for us as funeral professionals to promote. We want to promote life. Think about all the people that you've dealt with that maybe they really don't know their parents that well. They know they were good parents and they were nice, but how much do they know about their life? And so they wanted to have this program that encouraged people to just start talking about life and what matters, and then ultimately leading up to, how do you want to be remembered? And so if we start with that positive message, it's just not a bunch of funeral directors running around going, oh, this is going to help us boost preneed. Well, we hope that might be a byproduct, or that we might also have more people coming in knowing more about their loved one's life, and also people coming in who want to have ceremony. And again, it's a win-win, because it's a win for the consumer, but it's also a win for the profession. So what has born out of this is there's websites, there's videos, there's all kinds of resources, and right off of NFDA Central, there's a booth that talks about the Have the Talk of a Lifetime program, and they can tell you all about the resources. You can embed videos in your website, you can print brochures, and then ultimately they came up with a great tool about a year ago or so, and they're conversation cards, and it's a deck of playing cards. And on each card, there's a different message. For example, tell me about a time that you laughed until you cried. Tell me about an activity that you engage in that makes you lose track of time. And so the idea is then we're giving these out in our community, and we're encouraging people, whether it's at family Thanksgiving or any of these things, to sit down and start playing this game with their loved ones. And then all of a sudden, they're learning more and more about each other, and we're promoting these conversations. What we're going to share with you today are some of the things that we've done in our companies and activities in our community to use these cards that, again, have associated us with this positive message. And so it's not only a great thing for our families, but it's also a great opportunity to build relationships with allied professionals. Because we now can be talking, going to them, because a lot of us sit back and just think about, with allied professionals, it's like, well, they're just steering families to the low-cost provider. That's all one complaint. Or they don't really understand what we do. Well, that sounds like an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to go out there and say, you know what? We're allied professionals. We are all part of the continuum of care that is given to families. They pass the baton to us. And it would behoove us to know what each other does and to better work together. Because if our allied professionals, clergy, hospice, whomever, they're no different than consumers. Because if they don't know the difference in what we do and how we promote the value of life and honoring people, then they're just going to be like any consumer that says, well, I guess the cheapest is the best, because they must all be the same. And we know that they're not, right? So this is a great tool to be able to do that. I kind of tested this theory recently. My company has locations in Texas and Kansas and Missouri, New Mexico, Mississippi, and I'm going to share with you some of what we've done. Daniel and Jamie are going to share their activities. But I tested this theory recently. I was at a Chamber of Commerce event in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was talking to a hospice liaison. And so I told her just this. I was like, we need to better understand what each other does. We need to work together. And she's like, absolutely. She's just giving me an amen constantly. They're very willing and able to work with us. And this is a great way to do that. And I'm going to give you an example through one of our events how we did that. And so again, they're associating us with these activities. So before I tell you about this one, I just picked up an idea in the hall right before I walked in the door here, and I want to share that with you while it's fresh in my mind. You may be familiar with Roller Funeral Homes in Arkansas. They have about 28 locations, and the owner just stopped me, and she told me just last week they did an event with the cards, and they tied it in with an antique car show. So, and it was at a community center where the antique car show was going on, there were soccer practice going on, there's football fields. It's a big community hub, and they invited people in. They had hamburgers and hot dogs, and what they did is they used the antique cars as a lead-in to talk about, what's the story behind this car and what was going on during this time in this era with this car. And then they started breaking out the cards and had people in groups and started sharing stories, and it was very, very well received. But again, it was an activity to talk about life and to talk about what matters. Now, one of the things that we did in Albuquerque is there's a group of social workers that network with each other. And there are people who are in practice at facilities. Some of them have their own company. We hosted their monthly networking event at our funeral home in our community room. And we had the usual coffee and orange juice and donuts and all that kind of stuff. And we started off, and I got up and kind of gave a little bit of what I shared with you already about the program. But then we also, before we had the activity, they did an ice-breaking activity, which I thought was wonderful. They had everyone reach in their pocket or purse and pull out the first coin that they felt in there. And you pulled it out and looked at the date on the coin. And when you introduce yourself and say who you're with, share a memory from that year. Now, some of them, the coin was older than the person, but we had to kind of punt on that. And they maybe told a story about their parents. And it was really clever, and it really broke the ice. Now, the most creative one was this young guy, and he's like, hey, I'm a millennial, and I don't carry cash. So I pulled out my debit card, and I read the expiration date, which was obviously in the future, and he said, and I want to tell you where my company's going to be in this year. So I thought it was very clever. But then what we did is we broke out, and these are examples of the cards. Tell me about a time when you were proud of an accomplishment. What is your most fond memory of your childhood? What's your favorite musical group or musician? Do you have a fond memory of a concert? And on and on and on. There's 50 cards, 50 questions. We had them in groups of 4, and they each had a deck of cards, and the laughter in the room was amazing. And they all got it, and they all started taking the cards, and and we furnished multiple sets of cards that went back to facilities, to assisted livings, and it all was something that, again, was our way of showing in the community that we are promoting life and what really matters in life. At our place in Overland Park, Kansas, we had an activity called Painting Conversations. And now, first of all, you can tell we're funeral directors. We had just put new carpet in the chapel, so they put sheets down on the floor. Right? That's how we are. We're pretty fastidious about those things. So we had a local company that's called Pinots and Palettes. A common theme you're going to hear in all of our ideas is alcohol. So I just want to get that on the table. So we serve wine and hors d'oeuvres. I'm sorry? I thought somebody said something. But they started by introducing themselves, and then the painting company furnished all the supplies, and people were going to paint a tree of life. And the instructor kind of guided them through the class and gave some step-by-step instructions, but they were also intentionally ambiguous about things, so they kind of allowed people to be creative. And it was, even people who were not artistically inclined had a lot of fun with it. And they saw 2 and 3 generations of families that were represented. And so it really promoted the conversations. And then they had the wine and snacks, and they ended up with thanking people and then inviting them to take decks of cards, and they almost ran out. They said lots of the cards were taken. So again, away. And we just, last Thursday night, did this activity again this year. I'm sorry this picture's a little blurry, but this time we were brave and didn't put the sheets on the carpet. But we repeated the event, and they had about 15 people this time, but it was still very well received. In our business in Kennedale, Texas, we did an activity called Brush Your Family Tree. And so people were encouraged to, they first had a light dinner, and then they had a demonstration from the artists, and then they were talking about the importance of family and their loved ones. They had groups from the Rotary there. They also have a widows group at the funeral home, so they had people from that group and also people that they invited to start attending. And then even there was a senior center that brought people. And the amazing thing was that they had people come from as far away as 50 miles to attend this event. But this is an example of one of their works, and you can see on the leaves they painted the names of their family members. So that was actually a very good job. But again, another way to promote and then of course they used the cards in between and had the conversations. Our business in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this was all part of National Family History Month, which Sarah's going to talk about in just a little bit, we try to promote funeral homes doing these types of activities, and it's usually in October during National Family History Month. But we did one at the Albuquerque Museum, and we made a donation to the museum, and they advertised it on their website and on Facebook, and they had a big poster in the museum. And they had a facilitator there that helped people with their art, and they could create a family crest or a 3D portrait of themselves. And of course, and being in that area, they had postcards about Route 66, and they put memories of family vacations. And they could email them to one another. And one family took like 5 decks of cards to take to their family reunion. But the really great thing is we had 2 businesses, a hospice and also a care facility, and they each ordered 40 decks of cards, and our manager hand delivered them to them. So it was something, again, that we could do for the community, and again, that gave us that tie. And so the idea being, because so many times we're fearful of reaching out to these organizations because we don't want to feel like we're soliciting business. But if we're reaching out to these organizations in terms of relationship building, how can we work together to help our families? Then, and it's just like anything else we do. I mean, when you go to the Rotary Club or to the Chamber of Commerce and you're walking around shaking hands, you don't tell people, hey, if somebody in your family dies, give me a call. We don't do that, do we? But we hope that we make that positive impression that then we become the first person that they think about when there is a need. And that's what we're doing in this relationship building. And I can tell you countless times that I've talked to people from hospices, and they're so appreciative that we are reaching out to them and that we are also showing that interest. Because if you think about it, how many times have you gone to hospice and the staff there is crying when you're bringing the person into your care? They form a relationship with that family, and no different than clergy or anyone else, they're very protective of that relationship. And they want to know that the person that is taking care of this family is going to do so in a manner that's consistent with how they would. And one of the things I also validated in that conversation with the hospice liaison was, and a lot of people don't know this, but by virtue of hospice's accreditation, they're required to provide bereavement support to the family for up to 13 months after the death. And so they are looking for resources. They are looking for things that are going to help people, deal with their grief. Well, that begins with having a proper ceremony, doesn't it? And it also presents us with opportunities to be able to say, listen, you don't have a support group on my part of town, why don't you use our facility? All it costs you is coffee and punch and cookies. And, or if you're doing volunteer training, use us. You can come to our funeral home, take a tour, our staff will give a presentation, but you're showing how you're being collegial, how you're working with them. and then it's just a natural byproduct of that. You know, I know that hospices are not supposed to recommend providers, but it happens. But I also, you know, had a friend that was working at a large hospice, and I asked her one day, I'm like, how do you tell families about their choices in funeral homes? And they're like, well, we have this sheet, and it's got all the area funeral homes, and we just give it to them. And I sat there for a minute, and she went, but we like her. She's really nice. You know, they know, and they're interested in knowing who is going to take care of the family as they would. And activities like this and other things that we can do to, again, talk about life, to be able to share memories, and to also help people understand that this is all part of the healing process. And part of that is having ceremony and honoring the life. That's what we do. And that's what this opportunity presents. So we've been very, very pleased. And there's some other pictures from the event. But we had people drifting in and out. We had kids involved. It was really, really very well received. And so our managers talking to a couple. People are the kids are drawing pictures of family. So, that's yours. So it was really, really well received. Any questions about those events that my company did? And then I'll let Jamie and Daniel tell you about theirs. No, sir, that's at the Albuquerque Museum. So that particular one we did. Now, we did do some in our community centers at our funeral homes, but that particular one was. Anything else? Very good, guys.
Thanks, Mike. As Mike did say, I'm Daniel Wieting, and with me this afternoon is a warm-hearted human being and a cold-blooded entertainer. It's my beloved wife, Jamie, and actually the mastermind behind this whole thing. We were actually introduced to these Talk of a Lifetime cards at Leadership Conference last year. Prior to this, when the whole Talk of a Lifetime campaign came up, I was a huge fan. It was a way that you could get people to talk. My problem with it was I didn't really know how to engage people in that talk, right? We had all of the resources. We had the videos on our website, pamphlets in the funeral home, but there wasn't a good way, in my personal opinion, to actually engage people within our communities with the Talk of a Lifetime, to actually get these conversations started. When we saw these cards at Leadership, I was really, really, really excited about it. They weren't even offered at that time. It was just kind of like at the very forefront of production. This past summer, Jamie and I went to a ranger training down at NFDA's office in Brookfield, and they did a little Talk of a Lifetime with the cards with us in attendance. And our dear friend Sarah over here said, hey, in October, we're trying to get as many funeral homes across the country to have an event at their funeral home or to facilitate this using these cards. And Jamie, without even hesitating, said, yep, we're gonna do it. And I looked at her, I'm like, what the hell are we gonna do? Right? And we didn't know. Yeah, it was a great concept, but we weren't sure how we were gonna gather a whole bunch of people together to actually have them talk about intimate parts of their life, right? So our answer was to ply them with cheese, booze, and the Green Bay Packers. There's the food pyramid, and at the very bottom, it's all the grains and stuff that you're supposed to have most of in the food pyramid. Not in Wisconsin. That bottom part is cheese and liquor, right? Also in Wisconsin, one thing that you never want to plan something during is a Packer game. Everybody bleeds green and gold, right? I mean, we don't have visitations on Sundays. We don't have funerals. Honest to God, when I was an apprentice in Waukesha, the Packers were playing on a Monday night. We had a visitation scheduled. Family didn't know anything about it. Somebody came walking through the line and said, yeah, I'm going to get home and watch the Packer game. The family said, oh my God, we forgot all about it. And the family left. Right? And we're like, what are we supposed to do? He said, we don't care. Leave the doors open, shut them. We don't care. Go home. So yeah, Packers are a big deal up by us. So we thought, let's start this beer, wine, and cheese event, right? And the Packers happen to be playing later in the afternoon, so we'll put on a Packer game, Packer party afterward.
So we had the idea of what we wanted to do, but how do we do it? How do we get people to know about our event? How do we advertise? You can see on the left side there is our banner that we put on our website. NFDA was wonderful by providing us information and the tools for making the Talk of a Lifetime universal. So we used their banner and headline for that. We knew the beer, wine, and cheese, what we wanted to do. Now we got to get people to show up. So how do we do that? We really, in our advertising and our flyers that we distributed, we really downplayed the Talk of the Lifetime. Mostly because people don't understand what that is yet, besides funeral directors. So we didn't really want to put in and intimidate our clientele or our people in our community. We didn't want to intimidate them by, well, you're going to get together with a bunch of strangers and you're going to talk about stuff that makes you really uncomfortable. So we didn't want to play that up. So we really played up the beer, the wine, and the cheese, and kind of threw in the Talk of the Lifetime. As I met with people and they said, well, what is this Talk of the Lifetime? I tried to explain it, but it really wasn't going to be portrayed well enough until they actually came and did that. How we distributed flyers was through our churches. Our churches are wonderful around the area. We have a good relationship with our clergy. So we put those in every church service for 2 weeks. So all their bulletins were stuffed with our flyers. It was great because it was cheap advertising and it got our name out, which was wonderful. We are right in between the generation twist of Gen X, and I'm the beginning of the millennials. So we don't read newspapers anymore. That we know that some people do. So that's hard for us because we don't advertise a lot in newspapers for our business on a regular basis, if at all. But we thought that even though we might not gain anybody to this event through a newspaper, we thought it was just another way to get our name out there in a more creative light than just advertising or sponsoring, the girls' cross-country team. So it was another way to get our name and our business out there. So that's what we did. We highlighted the event. We wanted to, when we started the event, we wanted people to be on an intimate level. So we made name tags for everybody. You can see that I had name tags printed out. It does have our funeral home logo on it, but it is a glass of beer, so it was light. Not everybody did register. We tried to put it and promote it on there that there was an actual start time. We never put an ending time so that it didn't feel like an open house. We wanted everybody to start at 1 o'clock so they could be part of the whole event. We did have some blank registrations that if they for some reason got missed on a phone call or, hey, I'm here, or I brought this extra friend with me today, that they didn't feel left out and didn't have a name tag. So we were prepared with that as well, which worked out to be really well. We did have extra people who did come later, so that was an added bonus for us.
As a side note, too, we did advertise through Facebook and things and put those plugs out there, too. So it wasn't completely papered for that advertising. As people did arrive and we kind of introduced ourselves, we got them their name tags, we sent them into the funeral home where we had different football games playing on the TVs in the chapels, so at least they were entertained while all of the guests arrived. People just sat around and watched football for 20 minutes or a half hour, just depending. It was at that point then, once everybody arrived that we knew was coming, we broke everyone up into 3 groups. And we did that just right up in the entryway of the funeral home before we went to learn about new things, right? And we essentially had the 3 groups split up into the 3 parts. So there was beer, there was wine, there was cheese. We had a local winery and meadery come. They did bring just mead. That's something that they specialized in. Anybody know what mead even is? Mead? Yeah, it's a honey wine, right? It uses honey for the fermentable sugars. The gentleman from Solu talked about the history of the winery, talked about the wines that they have, talked about how they make things. We had samples. Let me tell you, best way to get people to talk is liquor them up, right? So there was a little bit of, play on that. So once you were done, each of these sections, we took about 20 minutes to learn things about each of these groups. So again, Solu, they had about 20 minutes to go through their stuff. We moved on to craft beer tasting. There's a local brewery right in our hometown. Makes some of the world's best beer as far as I'm concerned. I do like beer a lot. Pat, the guy that came, very, very, very passionate about beer and about his brewery. He's a second-generation brewmaster, loves his craft, and speaks very passionately about it. Brought several different varieties. And up on the screen there, we had TVs available for all of the presenters so that they could show pictures and talk about their products. So this is Pat just kind of talking about some of the beer making that he goes through. He is a salty, salty character. And he was so excited that I was going to show you this next picture. It was the back of his t-shirt. Can you all read that? And then we also have a local cheese store. They feature all kinds of, foods, drinks, everything. But we wanted them to focus strictly on cheese. And they talked a bit about cheese pairing with beer, cheese pairings with wines, cheese pairings with foods. Okay. Again, Wisconsin, we are well known for our cheeses, artisan cheeses. And that too is what Carrie and Kelly focused on. Their store is literally like half a block down the road from the funeral home. We live at the funeral home, so my kids are constantly running down there buying cheese. I think that we by ourselves pay their light bill. But they had a number of cheeses, lists that foods and, like I said, drinks go with these different cheeses, and people just thought it was a hoot. During this time, too, we had other snacks out for people to kind of munch on and settle with.
So we had the first part done. We had the beer, wine, and cheese, about 20 minutes each. We were with these people about an hour at this point. Now it was our opportunity to have the talk of a lifetime. So we took all of our 3 groups. We put them in a main seating area. This is our reception hall or our lounge area. And we put them in there, taught them a little bit about the beer, the wine, the cheese. Look across the table. How much do you know about that person? The love of your life, a parent. What do you want to learn about them? So that's how we started the presentation. On each of those tables, you can see that we had a line of cards, and we had 1 deck on each table. So that's how we presented it or had it out together. When we started the talk of the lifetime, we ourselves didn't know how we were going to do this part. And it came to us as I was driving in the car with my daughter and my mom, and we were running errands around town. And my daughter grabs a deck of cards and starts asking questions. And I'm answering a couple, and one of the questions that stuck out to me was, well, how did you and Dad meet? Oh, you don't know? No. Okay, so we talked a little bit about it. And some of the questions she could answer, some of the questions I could answer for my mom. But there was another question that my mom was asked by my daughter, and she said, Grandma, if you could go back in any time, where would you go? Well, of course I'm thinking it was my birth, right? No. She wanted to go back to she was 17 years old in the back of a pickup truck, having a really good time with her good friends. And I said, didn't know that. Like, that's something interesting to me that I learned that a little bit about my mom, who I consider to be my best friend. So that's...
Not me.
Well, I know a lot about you. So that was interesting to me. I said, this isn't so bad. I don't feel intimidated. This is going to be okay. So we got everybody in. Dan highlighted a little bit as he talked, we were very casual ourselves because we didn't want to be the funeral directors at this event. We wanted to be like everybody else. So we sat down, we had the beer, wine, and cheese. Now we were going to play the game as well. So Dan highlighted that. He had people shake hands across the table, introduce themselves, start that conversation just very simple. Hi, my name is Jamie. Gave him a handshake. So that's how we started the event for this part. After that introduction, we kind of brought them all together. And again, we highlighted, now how are we really going to get to know these people? Some of them you live with. Some of them you never met before. So we played a little game. We had each family or each person pick up 3 cards. That's all they had to do. Not a whole deck. Some people picked up a card, read it, and put it back. The next person grabbed their 3 cards and read them all. Our instructions were to take that card and play with those 3 cards with somebody across the table. And originally, when we started, we wanted them to change partners. Well, it didn't really work out how we originally planned because people took the tables and they all ran with it in a different direction. As we walked around, I had one table who each took 1 card out of their 3 that they were comfortable answering, and they all answered it. And they had lots of laughs and lots of tears of joy. And the next family, they went around, or the next table I went to, they went around, and it was just them. There was just 2 of them at the table, or that's who they felt comfortable with. As you can see from our pictures, we have older generations, we have younger generations, we had kids at the event, so it really highlighted everybody, because that's who we need to learn from, is everybody. So you can see, again, from the pictures, the different generations that we did highlight and the tools that they had to play. Again, walking around, just fun, laughter. A comment that we had after was, I've never seen my dad cry. And he was getting a little choked up. He was proud of me. I didn't know he was proud of me. So it was a good conversation starter. As we went through the day, we wanted to make this event 20 minutes as well, because really we realized that this could have went on forever. They could have played with all 50 cards.
They wouldn't have stopped.
No, they wouldn't have. So we brought it back together, and we kind of looked at each other and said, okay, I think they've had enough time. So we brought them all back together, said, okay, now what? Now what can you do with them? And that's where we highlighted that they could take them home, start the conversation, get it started at home, get it started at Thanksgiving, get it started at work.
We had a whole bunch of decks of cards out for people to take. We thought, maybe one family would take a pack of cards. It wasn't at all like that. It was like each person took 6 or 7 decks of cards. So just be aware that if you're going to be doing something like this, that you plan for that, because people are so enamored with the thought that, hey, I can actually have a conversation with somebody without being awkward. They're going to take it. And it just went over really, really well. After everybody had their decks of cards, we basically said, stick around for as long as you want. We had the Packer game turned on. We put out tacos. People stayed through the afternoon, watched football, drank beer, drank wine, ate cheese. Not everybody stayed, but a good chunk of people did. And once the game was over, everybody kind of took off. It was such a surreal experience, and I think that's why NFDA brought us here, because when they look at these 2 podunk individuals from the middle of Wisconsin, that we can pull something off like this, anybody can do it, right? And I encourage you to. Not a mention was made about funerals that day. There wasn't anything mentioned about pre-need. There's no pre-funding. It was literally all about people. And folks, let me tell you, the people that were there are going to remember that more than any sales pitch I could have possibly given them. Whoops. We had a couple of people, more than 2 actually, reach back out to us after this was all done with some pretty profound statements. Very thankful for the event that was put on.
The first quote says, "Playing this game with friends and family really helped me get to know them, but also brought a new self-awareness and examination to my own experience and values." And I just want to add a little bit to that. That same person was the person who asked me beforehand, "What are we going to do?" And I tried to explain it. And she came back with, "I didn't get it. I didn't get it till I was actually there. And it was kind of fun." So.
And Mel said, "I honestly didn't expect to get much out of it. I thought, what more is there to know? Not only did I learn things about my spouse, but I made new friends and learned things about them too. It didn't stop after we left. We spent the whole car ride home talking about our favorite memories of our grandparents. I brought a deck of cards to work and we pull a card here and there. It's been really neat and wonderful learning about people. Thank you for the opportunity I would not have otherwise had." That's awesome. It actually almost brings a tear to my eye. That something so simple meant so much to people. It was wonderful.
And what's also nice about our event too is when we first started it, I thought, "Oh man, I'm going to have to beg people to come. Nobody's going to want to come." But it was nice. It wasn't just our parents there. It was other community members lots of different churches that we could see pulled from. That's what we tallied when people called in to register too. That was one question that we asked. "How'd you hear about our event?" Just so we could, self-evaluate how we advertise in the future.
Because we do plan on doing this again. So all of you are invited to Wisconsin next year. We'll put some beer and wine on for you.
How many people do you have to show up the day of
I think 5 to 10. We had 75 total. So that's why we split the groups up into 3, because 75 people all getting a little glass of wine at one time was just going to be chaotic. That's about as big as we probably want the event. We did have, we're a limited size too, so we only could be so big. So we split them up. It was good.
Did you limit the size of the number of people coming then?
We did, and on our flyer too, it said that space is limited. But we weren't going to turn somebody away if they turned up that day.
From an area that I was kind of stepping back a little bit and having a flyer that said you really use churches.
Yes.
The first word of the flyer was beer.
Yeah.
And where we come from, in Southern Illinois, I don't think our churches, Southern Baptists, would
Good old Roman Catholics
Right,
like
yeah.
their beer.
Roman Catholics and Lutherans drink beer like crazy. So the question is, about our event, don't use our event, right? You got to think about things that are important in your areas. What's going to... Yeah. Yep. It helps, but, quantum mechanics and laser robots might be important in your area. So, put on a presentation for that. I don't know. I don't know what it is that the people in your community love. I only know that the people in my community love beer, wine, and cheese.
And the Packers. And we were okay with churches saying no too. So we...
You had some say no?
No.
No, we didn't. But we were okay with them saying no, if that was okay. So we called each minister individually and said, "This is what we want to do." And because of the relationship that we have with those ministers, they were okay with it. It's not going to work everywhere. Any other questions?
Way back there.
Was there any follow-up done after your meeting with the people that pre-registered or registered for the event and follow up with them afterwards, maybe even trying to get them to come back for preneed or anything like that, or things like that?
So the question is whether or not there was any follow-up with the people in attendance. And the answer to that is no. Because when we started out doing this, we didn't want to sell anything. We are fully expecting to take a loss on this deal. That's how we went into it, financially. But those people are going to remember how they felt sitting at that table across from somebody that they loved. And they're going to remember where they were, right? They won't remember a single thing that I told them that day. But they're going to remember that connection that they had with dad, with grandpa, sibling, and they're going to remember us. I know you had a question too.
Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin, too, London.
Pretty close to us, yeah.
Yes, Chilton is a small community. The question is we're from a small community and wanted to know how we advertise and how we reached out to other communities. We pretty much stayed in the Chilton area. We did put flyers and things out to other churches in the surrounding areas without stepping on another funeral home's toes. Obviously, we want our name out there, but we were respectful to those fine boundary lines as well.
Just by geographical location, we're surrounded by lots of small communities too. So yes, we were promoting ourselves in those smaller communities as well.
It was a Sunday afternoon. Right after church. It was a 1 o'clock event, yes. And to define small, we're a 120 call funeral home.
Were you concerned at all of the liability of sending people out after they've had alcohol in your facility?
Yes, well, okay, so the question is if we were concerned with people having alcohol in our facility. And the answer to that is yes. We checked with our insurance company first to make sure that we were covered. And
Yes, we were covered, and 2, we weren't selling the alcohol. So there's a fine line in the state of Wisconsin if you're selling or have it at an event.
There's something called dram shop rules, meaning that if somebody comes onto your premise, gets hammered and gets hurt, you're not responsible. The question is, what percentage do we think came for the free beer and wine versus how many actually wanted to come for the talk? I would say that without a doubt, 100% of the people in attendance came for the free wine and beer, except for the kids, and they got brought along by the adults, right? And we, again, knew that going in.
Did you have any special marketing material with the cards? I will have to take a look at the cards. They have Talk of a Lifetime and the question on the back. Did you have any kind of marketing material to put the cards in so they'll remember you, if you don't know?
So that's a really good question. He asked if there was marketing material that we had with the cards. The answer is yes. Not so much for us, but it had our logo on it. And Sarah's going to touch a little bit on that too. With the Talk of the Lifetime cards, I got them, the first pack that I got, and I said, great, they don't remember who gave it to them. I want somebody to remember my name. They said, we can put your logo on the deck of cards on the outside, on the box. Well, how many of you guys have decks of cards that are rubber band together? I do. So then they let us we worked with NFDA on that too, and they let us put our logo on each and every card. So that was pretty awesome. As far as selling anything for us though, nope, just our name on every card.
Well, what you did sell is you sold yourself.
Right, exactly. We worked with NFDA through that. So I talked to Sarah and Carmela, and they helped me with a graphic designer. I gave them my logos, said which one's going to fit. They made it work out, and it was wonderful.
We can't say enough about the help that NFDA gave to us to put this on. Like, we were basically connected at Sarah's hip for about a month and a half. She's probably tired of us.
And that was something, too, that they walked us through. We did pay a little bit more per deck. I will give you that. But to me, that's worth it, just to have my name on there. And to kind of piggyback what you're saying, we thought to ourselves, too, now what? Now what do we do? We can't have beer, wine, and cheese. That's going to get old in our community, too. So we tossed about the idea, do we give them to our families when they come? Well, no, because that person already had died. And what more of a slap in the face of, I should have asked Mom that question when she was still here. So what we've done is we've kind of crafted a unique way to put them in towards our pre-arrangements or pre-planning. So when we already have somebody in the door, they get a deck of cards. Go home with this. Use this. Ask Mom. Go to the nursing home. I don't care if they get left in the nursing home. So they have that tool to use. So kind of to piggyback off of what you're doing. And getting our logo on the card was relatively quick turnaround too. Like all of a sudden they were at my back door. I thought, great, least we have these in time. So it was, if you want to do an event before Thanksgiving, the turnaround was real good, so.
How many children did you have, and anything special children?
Well, we have 4 children, so.
We didn't give them beer.
The children that we had, the most of the children that we had, I think there was 10. They knew my kids. My kids took them and went. Other children stayed and watched the Packer game upstairs or went in different rooms. Others went along and we had soda for them and root beer, and so the children were part of the event for some of it.
Well, and we have the place in Albuquerque. Overland Park is a suburb of Kansas City. So that's a large metropolitan area. And then the Paint Your Family Tree was in Kennedale, which is actually a suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth. So they're all areas, but no matter what size city, you have your community that you serve. And I think it's starting to focus on your community and networking through your churches and through your other allied professionals. But really, the advantage that you have is that, a lot of the people know each other. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, it's just about bringing people together. And another thing I wanted to point out was that I think a lot of times when you think of these events, you try to think of, okay, I'm going to spend all this money. What's the return on investment? But I really think we have to think about how many things we do, whether it's monetarily or just of our time, that we're making an investment. When you're out working at the Rotary Club or whatever, you don't really measure how many calls you get out of that, but every once in a while somebody calls and says, I met you at the Rotary Club, can you help me? And I like to point out to our employees, the consumer research that NFDA does every year, year after year after year, number one, they ask people, how many funeral homes did you check with before you made your decision? Overwhelmingly, it's 1. The people that check 2, 3, 4 are the minority. And then they said, why did you select the funeral home? And the number one response is always a previous experience with that firm. That could mean that you assisted them with another family member, or it could mean that they came to your location for beer, wine, cheese, and Packers. It could mean a lot of things.
We have a call going on right now that we.
Right.
And like what Dan had said too before, it wasn't what we were trying to sell, but people are going to remember how they felt that day, and they are going to remember where they were. And we piggybacked with social media too, and people shared the event. Yeah, they were maybe some of my friends and family sharing, but they're reaching out to other people. And that to me, again, more of a millennial, I'm still getting my name out, and it's not for a sponsor of a newspaper that's just going to get tossed or the page turned.
So did both sets use that, or what? Did you do
All of
any
the above.
social media stuff?
We just did Facebook and the flyers.
We did social media and also networking through churches and other organizations, and didn't run an ad in the paper or anything, but it's
We just knew we couldn't have anything that day. So, you guys some of you may do Holiday of Remembrance services too. We also do that in our funeral home. We just know that we can't have a visitation that day. We also picked a Sunday, and a Packer game. So our timing was a little
You
bit.
treat it like a funeral, right? This is the building's occupied. You wouldn't schedule 2 visitations or 2 services at the same time in the same place either. It's no different than trying to coordinate 2 at-need calls.
And that was something that was on our calendar. So when we were meeting with families, I think I looked at all the guys there. I'm like, make sure you don't plan anything this day.
Don't screw this up, Dan.
So we focused with your
Community.
your location.
Right. And again, we gave you what works for us in Little Chilton, Wisconsin. You are all different. We're all different. We're all in this together, but we're all different, right? So you just have to figure out what's going to be best for you and your community.
And it was fun.
Hi, I'm Sarah Moss, and I'm with the National Funeral Directors Association, and I've been working very closely with the Funeral Service Foundation with these Have the Talk events in October. The reason we're doing them in October is National Family History Month, And the idea of National Family History Month and having the talk with families just goes together wonderfully. I encourage you, after you fill out your survey, to take the pages behind it home with you. It's our toolkit. It's all of the materials that we give to you, media releases, everything you need is in this toolkit. There's also a playbook in here of about 25 very different ideas that you could have at your funeral home. Our goal, because it's 50 cards, 50 questions, is to get at least one funeral home in every state to join us for National Family History Month. This year we had 31 sites. We even had it at schools. There were 5 fifth grade classes throughout the United States that used these for family history projects. We had multiple events all over the United States, so we definitely encourage you to join. Today you'll be leaving with a deck of cards. If you would like to sign up today to help us next October, we'd greatly appreciate it. And I direct you to read the January Director, because every funeral home that participated will be interviewed and there will be photos from each event.
Thank you all for being here. Sorry, one more question.
The cards are $5 a deck. With the logo, I'm not exactly sure, but everybody that does sign up does get 50 free decks. Correct.
It depends on how many you ordered. So they gave me a breakdown of if I ordered 250, it was so much a deck. If I ordered 500 or 1,000.
Thank you all for being, we got a break. The next session.
Pardon?
That's if you sign up to do an event for next October.
Correct. You don't have to sign up today. You can sign up whenever.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry, we got
Yes.
to let the next session in. Appreciate it.
Thank you for viewing this session. Please log on to the NFDA website at nfda.org to view more educational offerings.